Gotcha.
Hey, how's it going everybody? It's the Game Economist, and today we'll be taking a look at the Dragonslayer axe. Not the big one, the little one. Let me talk a little bit about the build. I went with a Blessed Infusion on the Dragonslayer axe. Your other options probably would have been like Raw or Sharp Infusions, where you do a Lightning Blade buff, but I feel like Blessed is better for a few reasons. First of all, in the buffed build, since the Dragonslayer axe doesn't have a very strong approach, you're not able to like pressure opponents after buffing. This lets them play passively, punish you for being aggressive, and throw dual charms on you until your buff sort of ends. Meanwhile, on a Blessed build, it's the other way around. If you're just sort of milling about, you're getting your health back, you're able to use Warcry. See, Warcry would cancel any other buff on the weapon, but since we're not putting other buffs on the weapon, Warcry is totally legit here, and that brings the AR to 500-ish on this weapon, which is totally acceptable. That's good enough damage that you're going to be getting your damage break points of 3 sets of R1 combos. So yeah, I thought Blessed build was probably your best option. At the same time, I threw on some miracles, some utility miracles, because the damage started getting inefficient after Faith 40. So that's really not enough Faith to consider like a hardcore cleric build. And instead I went with utility miracles. Now when I was doing invasions, I brought the Wrath of the Gods, because that kind of is a utility miracle. At the same time, it does a little bit of damage, but being able to knock into the group with a good amount of poise, and you can follow it with the Undead Hunter charms. So yeah, for invasions I had Wrath of the Gods, but for a duel where nobody's running away, I brought the Dastardly Projected Heal. I also have Tears of Denial, that's not a surprise, and Bountiful Light, which is just a really strong health regen spell. If you see an opponent using Bountiful Light, you know they're going to get a solid chunk of health back, and it's just going to be annoying. Now, when it came to using the actual weapon, there were all sorts of drawbacks. First of all, the moveset is just a vanilla axe moveset. It doesn't do anything special at all. You can use the Warcry, which gives you like the charged R2, which nobody who is good at the game gets fooled by. At the same time, it has really short range. I shouldn't say really short range, but what I should say is that the Millwood axe has better range than it, and then the Man Serpent hatchet has way better range than it. So the question is like, if I'm going to use an axe, why would I ever use this one? Well, it's not the moveset, it's not necessarily the damage either. There's no reason. In fact, there's a reason not to use it. That innate lightning damage that is characteristic of the Dragonslayer axe is secretly kind of a weakness, because if your opponent takes a lightning Lothric shield, they can pretty much shut you down. It also means you're doing split damage even when they're not totally blocking all your lightning damage with the shield. You're dealing split damage, so you're not really getting your best damage out of the weapon. In duels, I often found myself either being outspaced by longer ranged weapons, outsped by weapons like the Pontiff Curved Sword, or outpoised by players. Some players even brought out the mace and the war pick, and they're like, haha, I gotcha. You know what I mean? I didn't really have a way to respond to that, except for bringing out the hardcore utility items like offhanding a crossbow and just passively shooting exploding bolts the whole game. There wasn't really anything I could do. The approach on the axes is just so terrible. It's not the worst in the game, but it's like on the low side, isn't it? And then even though the first R1 on an axe comes out at the same speed as a sword, doesn't it seem kind of odd? Like the hitbox is some weird diagonal thing. So if your opponent's actually rolling to your left or your right, sometimes it misses where you're like, if I had been holding a sword of the exact same range, that probably would have landed. I felt that happening a lot. And then as many of you know, the second R1, you go R1, R1, the second R1 actually comes out slower than, like a curved sword or a long sword. So you're at a disadvantage there, because people who are really, really reactive, they know after your first R1 that you have to retreat. You don't want to risk your second R1, because they could potentially interrupt it even. If they're very clever, if they know exactly how to outspace you. And yeah, they're going to outspace you because it's just such an odd hitbox on axes. And again, this is not one of the better, it's not like the really good ranged axes in the game. So in duels, definitely low tier. I know it's reactive. It's a reactive weapon. Well, so is the Broken Straight Sword. Just because a weapon swings fast doesn't mean it's good, i.e. look at all of the daggers in the game. And then in invasions, it was even worse because if your war cry ran out, you didn't really do enough damage to punish their Estus drinking, which is a big deal in invasions. So not enough burst damage, and obviously no poise. Well, you get a tiny amount of poise after war cry is activated. You get a tiny amount of poise on the R2, but it's like not even worth it. You're just going to lose your trade with many of the poised weapons that you confront when you're doing an invasion. And of course, they're always in a group, so it's like you're always looking at their staggered moves. And when I say staggered, I mean like player 1 attacks, a brief moment later, player 2 attacks, and then another brief moment later, player 3 attacks. That's a staggered, like stairs, right? And if you get hit by one of those, you get hit by 2 or even 3 of them. It's terrible, right? And it's also very fast. You know, it's not like just because Lothric Longsword is fast doesn't mean that it's going to be really competent against 3 great clubs. If they're all crowding you, one of them's going to hit you. That's how it ends up. That's how it actually plays out. So if you ever hear someone say, "Oh yeah, dual weapons are just as good in invasions," maybe it's because they haven't played a lot of invasions. I don't know. Finally, in PvE, I felt like the weapon continued to suffer. If you're fighting something that's weak to lightning, it's okay. It's just okay. The damage is good. The Blessed Infusion kind of helps if you're doing like a long run to a boss, right? But then again, it's a very short-ranged weapon, and if you're skilled enough to accurately dodge your opponent the whole game, because you're not relying on poise, if you're just really good at dodging, you're probably good enough that you don't even need that extra health regen, so that's pretty much irrelevant. And the damage is good, I guess. The damage is good on that opponent who's weak to lightning, but then you run into opponents who are strong against lightning, right? They're resistant to lightning, and suddenly it's kind of a shitty weapon. You can't trade it out with a different version of it. You know, you can't swap between, like, I suppose you could swap over to a dark infused version of it, but a chunk of the damage is always going to be lightning, so it's never going to do as well as if you had like multiple sets of the Man Serpent Hatchet. So in PvE, it was kind of like mid to low tier. Invasions, it was clearly low tier. Duels, it was kind of like upper low tier. That's how I would describe it. And I'll have all of that at the end of the video in text form. As usual, I'll do the tier ratings. Next, we'll do some invasions, so I'd like you guys to enjoy that. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
This is a load of barnacles.
know what he does next?
What?
You really want to know?
What?
Are you sure you want to know?
What does he do?
He gets ya!